Iraqi politicians cast their votes in the country's parliamentary elections, a process seen as unlikely to dramatically alter the balance of power, but closely watched by both Tehran and Washington. The election marks another chapter in Iraq's long struggle with political reform and public demands for accountability. At a polling station in Baghdad's Qarada district, prominent political figures were among the early voters. Former Prime Minister and Vice President Nouri al-Maliki was seen preparing to vote, joined by Qais al-Khazali, the leader of the Shiite militia Asaib al-Haq. The two men greeted each other before proceeding to cast their ballots, a moment that underscored the enduring influence of Iraq's established political factions. Nearby, former Prime Minister Adel Abdel Mahdi was also present, speaking briefly with al-Maliki and al-Khazali. Inside the polling station, members of Iraq's Independent High Electoral Commission and accredited observers monitored the proceedings closely. The process included voter card verification, showing the number of ballots cast compared to the total number of registered voters, a key measure of transparency in a country where public confidence in elections remains fragile. For many Iraqis, this vote represents more than a procedural exercise. It is a test of whether democratic institutions can address deep-seated issues of corruption and governance. Turnout levels, while modest in early reports, were seen as an indicator of public engagement after years of political fatigue. Hiyam al-Yasiri, Iraq's Minister of Communications, delivered a pointed message to voters. Speaking at the polls, she said, simply remaining passive or choosing a boycott will not lead to anything. Ultimately, our constitution and parliamentary system remain in place, and within that system, change and the fight against corruption can only be achieved through the ballot box. Her remarks reflected a broader concern that disillusionment among citizens could weaken reform efforts. In a follow-up statement, al-Yasiri added, those who have chosen to boycott the elections, don't they want to fight corruption? How can they fight corruption? By staying home. They should instead vote for honest candidates capable of leading the fight against corruption. The message echoed a growing sentiment within segments of the Iraqi government, urging participation as the only viable path toward institutional change. Analysts note that while the outcome is expected to maintain Iraq's current power structure dominated by Shiite political blocs and alliances with ties to Iran, the election could still influence coalition dynamics in the coming months. Security at polling stations remained tight. Police vehicles lined the streets of Baghdad, particularly around high-profile voting centres. Officials reported no major incidents during the early hours of voting, though past elections in Iraq have often been accompanied by security challenges, including attempts to disrupt the process through violence or intimidation. The Independent High Electoral Commission emphasised that all polling centres were operating under standard procedures, with observers from local and international organisations present to ensure compliance with electoral law. Digital verification devices tracked voter numbers in real time, a measure intended to reduce fraud and bolster credibility. Despite government appeals, voter turnout remains a critical question. Political analysts in Baghdad suggest that years of political stagnation, economic hardship and corruption scandals have eroded public trust. Nevertheless, the presence of senior politicians at the polls was intended to project stability and legitimacy. Former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, who once led Iraq through turbulent years following the US withdrawal, continues to command influence within the Shiite political establishment. His appearance alongside militia leader Qais al-Khazali highlighted the interconnected nature of Iraq's political and paramilitary networks, alliances that remain central to shaping the country's direction. Observers from the United Nations and regional organizations have underscored the importance of the vote for Iraq's democratic continuity. While the political landscape may not shift dramatically, the election is expected to determine the makeup of parliament for the next 4 years, influencing government formation and key ministerial appointments. Across Baghdad, polling centres opened early with a steady flow of voters throughout the morning. Many expressed scepticism about whether the new parliament would bring tangible change, yet others describe voting as a civic duty, a necessary step toward accountability. The communications minister's remarks underscored the government's strategy to counter voter apathy by framing participation as a form of resistance against corruption Officials hope to re-energise segments of the population that have previously abstained. This approach follows months of public campaigns encouraging citizens to exercise their right to vote despite political disillusionment. Regional powers are also monitoring the process closely. Iran, with long-standing ties to several Iraqi factions, is watching for any signs of shifts in influence. Washington, meanwhile, remains focused on Iraq's stability amid broader regional tensions and its role in maintaining counter-terrorism cooperation. The election comes amid ongoing challenges: economic recovery, reconstruction after years of conflict, and the need for improved public services. Iraq's parliament, composed of 329 seats, will play a central role in forming the next government and setting the policy agenda on issues ranging from energy and foreign investment to defence and anti-corruption measures. At the Karada polling site, officials reported consistent turnout through the afternoon, as the verification screens showed incremental increases in participation. Electoral staff urged citizens still waiting outside to remain patient. Voters were required to present biometric ID cards to ensure authenticity, a reform introduced after previous disputes over voter rolls. By evening, counting had begun in several districts, with preliminary results expected within 48 hours. Political analysts expect a fragmented outcome, with coalition negotiations likely to follow. Past elections have shown that government formation in Iraq can take weeks or even months as parties navigate competing interests. In a country still recovering from years of instability, today's vote reflects both continuity and cautious hope: continuity in its familiar political faces, and hope that the process, however slow, might eventually yield greater accountability. As ballot boxes are sealed and transferred to counting centres, Iraq's democratic machinery continues its cycle. Whatever the results, the election serves as another test of the country's commitment to constitutional governance and peaceful political transition. The communications minister's message captures the core of this effort. Change and the fight against corruption can only be achieved through the ballot box. The parliamentary vote concludes with Iraq once again at a crossroads, balancing public frustration, entrenched political interests, and the ongoing search for credible reform within its democratic system. As counting continues across Iraq, electoral officials emphasize transparency and accuracy as their top priorities. International observers from the United Nations and regional organizations are expected to issue preliminary assessments within the next 24 hours, focusing on procedural integrity, turnout rates, and the overall conduct of the vote. Early reports suggest the process has been largely orderly, with no major disruptions or security incidents reported during the day. The final certified results, once confirmed by the Electoral Commission, will determine the shape of Iraq's next coalition government, a process that often involves complex negotiations among multiple political blocs. Beyond the immediate outcome, this election serves as a measure of Iraq's democratic resilience. It highlights the country's ongoing effort to balance popular demands for reform with the realities of entrenched political power. Whether or not the new parliament ushers in significant change, officials stress that participation itself remains a crucial step toward national stability and governance. For millions of Iraqis, the hope endures that, as Minister Hiyam al-Yasiri put it, change and the fight against corruption can only be achieved through the ballot box.